It has become an AAM tradition to invite a local architect to introduce the visiting architect. Tonight, it is my pleasure to welcome Harry Teague of Harry Teague Architects, based in Basalt, Colorado. Harry Teague graduated from Dartmouth College in 1966 and received his Master's of Architecture from the Yale School of Architecture in 1972. Since 1975, he has produced buildings that are shaped by the principle that design matters and that well-designed buildings can make a significant contribution to the well-being of the individuals and communities that use them. Harry Teague designs to elevate the human spirit. Some of Harry's award-winning local civic and educational projects include the Benedict Music Tent and Harris Concert Hall, Aspen Center for Physics, Anderson Ranch Art Center, and the Aspen Country Day and Aspen Music School, also known as the Bucksbaum Campus. Please help me to welcome Harry Teague.
Thank you, Annie. Boy, don't you like this new venue? It's wonderful. I hope you can see the slides well enough, but it's absolutely spectacular. This architecture series is phenomenal. The people that they have come and talk are always excellent. They're top-notch. They're not always the household names. They probably will be someday. And it's really a great pleasure and an honor to be here and introduce some of the architects. Interestingly, the ones that I have been successful at getting to introduce have all been women. Jan Gang and Tatiana Bilbao and now Heike. It's just phenomenal that there are these extraordinary women. They're not just women architects, they're extraordinary architects. And what we find is now that women have successfully invaded the male bastion of architecture, they've also become extremely successful at kicking our butt and are really quite extraordinary. So I just want to say Heike is here not as a woman architect, but as an extraordinary architect. And a very influential contemporary one at that. The first that I was told, and I don't know too much about this, maybe she'll talk about this a little bit, but our first connection when she started to show up was at the Venice Biennale back in 1999, where she collaborated with a Japanese architect, Tatsuo Miyajima? Yeah, okay. And the part that intrigued me about that was, and maybe she'll just describe some of that briefly, but is that there was a Buddhist connection there. And the connection between Buddhism and minimalism and Buddhism and the sort of the reductivist kind of architecture that we're going to talk about that later with their wonderful building in Weimar, is that there is a connection between that, reducing the non-significant, the insignificant elements down to the pure form and so on is probably somewhat of a Buddhist concept, but she can better describe that than I can. I don't know how many of you know, but most European architecture commissions are awarded by commission. And Heike's amazing success at diving into this very competitive world is extraordinary. Her first success was with the addition, or the first one I know of, maybe others, but the first one that I know of, is the addition to the Gunnar Asplund designed Stockholm Library. And this is one of those iconic buildings that everybody that studies architecture gets exposed to at one point or another, and just happens to be one of my favorite buildings in the world. And she was selected out of 1,100 entrants to be a finalist, and then succeeded in among the 5 finalists to actually win that competition. The actual construction, this happens sometimes in competitions, of that building was delayed in 2009 for political reasons, and so it hasn't been built yet. I hope someday it will. I don't know, maybe she can tell us whether that's a positive that could happen or not, but I certainly hope it can someday. So the next competition that she won was for producing a building to house the collection of Bauhaus artifacts in Weimar, which is, as maybe we've had so many events now related to the Bauhaus, maybe everybody knows this history, that the Bauhaus started in Weimar and didn't move to Dessau until 1926 or something like that, some date in there. But the first part, it was in Weimar Republic. And so that particular city lays claim to the birthplace of the Bauhaus. And our wonderful speaker will explain and show the building that she designed for that space. Now, I just want to say, as somebody that is, because of the buildings that I've done that were just mentioned by Annie, worked in the presence of, near and in and alongside a Bauhaus architect, Herbert Bayer, I'm very familiar with the sort of the burden that is laid upon somebody that dares to interfere or approach or be next to those buildings. And so I have a huge amount of respect for the restraint and beautiful solution that Heike came up with that she will show you. It has classical elements in it that relate it to the public area. It had to, I don't know whether it's strictly, and she'll maybe say how directly it relates to Bauhaus, the Bauhaus Manifesto, but certainly in its minimalism and simplicity and geometric form, it pays great and reverent homage to that wonderful tradition. There's a quote here about it. Many of the designs that were submitted for the competition were steel and glass in a Bauhaus tradition, but the winning design by Hanada, is no exception to this trend, but it sets itself ahead of its peers with its sense of refinement. Its design of strikingly bold simplicity, basically minimalism, and evocative materiality. Its simple geographic form. To pull that off, it has to be exquisitely detailed. And I think that when you see the solution, and now this building is built, it opened in April, you'll see the beautiful and delicate and in many ways extraordinary refinement of detail. There's some amazing uses of artificial light and whatnot, and I'll let Heike describe all that. So I admire all this extremely, and can't wait to hear about it. And so I hope that you will welcome Heike Hanada to our town from Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm very, very pleased. It's the first time for me to be in Aspen, and I feel it's a wonderful place and a very, a very not only interesting place, but something special, how to deal with art and music, and I feel very home in a way in the middle of America. I have the feeling it's a rare place. I don't know if I'm right, but this is my first feeling. Well, I start this lecture about, basically it's about the Bauhaus Museum, but I start a little bit to show you or to introduce myself with some images because I work also as an artist, and therefore I have a bit two different kind of approaches to architecture. One is when I see things through the eyes of an artist, and the other one when I really start to design a project. And I think that's important to understand finally why the project ended up as it did. Maybe is it better to? I feel it's closer. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So thanks. Can I stand there? Yeah. Here, this probably, it's a very sad, the images are not so strong on the screen as they could be. Well, anyway, I wanted to show you here an exhibition which I just did recently with the theme Metamorphosis. And there I showed images of the museum and images and objects of former art installations. Yeah, unfortunately, the screen is not showing it so well, but maybe you get a little impression by the work I did. Here, for example, it's an image of an exhibition I did just after the Asplund competition. And you see some details of the foyer of the Asplund Library and some study modeling. And in detail, you can see it here. So the main theme was, at that time, I was occupied by the idea how to deal with circle and square, because the Asplund Library has basically this main theme in it, and I wanted to transform it into a modern form. And another competition I won was an idea competition, which was announced by Raphael Moneo, and I won also I got the first prize. It's the theme was the 9-foot square problem of John Haydock, and we were asked to rethink this 9-foot square problem in the time of today, and I was interested in the question of how interior and exterior space can melt into each other. And you can see here through this circular forms cut into this cube that I tried to create this kind of transitional space. So this is basically all I wanted to show, because I think it gives you a different hint of my character as an artist and architect. Here we start with the city of Weimar, and I think the most important thing to understand is that Weimar is not Dessau. So what happened is that Henry van der Velde, who came to Weimar, he was invited by the Duke of Sachsen, Eisenach Sachsen. He invited van der Velde, and van der Velde had the chance to build up this arts and crafts school in Weimar. And this was actually then the place where the Bauhaus was founded. So van der Velde called Gropius 1919 to Weimar to overtake this school. So what Gropius first did is he just took all the workshops which were placed there and used them to create a totally new school. And after 1 year, he wrote the manifesto of the Bauhaus, and the radical change of this art school has happened. And interesting for me then, when the competition was called, was that the city of Weimar decided not to build or to ask for a building or museum next to this original place where the Bauhaus was founded, but they decided something completely different. And this I try to show here. So you see here, this is the position of the building you just saw on the image. And this is this Bauhaus school, Bauhaus University until today. You see here the city center of Weimar with the castle, and the Goethe's little house is here. but they decided to place the museum next to this so-called Neues Museum and something what was replaced here in the 30s. The Neues Museum was already for Van der Velde a very important place because this was the first new museum which was built. And when I started to think here, you see it in an old slide, and you can see that this museum used to have a beautiful park, and it was a very moving topography, so there was a steep kind of hill, and even there was a bridge crossing a little valley in front of the museum. But what was happened in the 30s is that Hitler, for Hitler, Weimar was one of his favorite towns. He decided to build there something called Gauforum. He had several middle-sized cities where he planned that to do, but Weimar is the only place where the fascists actually realized that. And what happened is that they very brutally erased and knocked down old quarters of the city, the old parts here and here. And they filled up this valley, which was about 8 meters deeper than it is today. So they filled up this valley and to get a kind of equal ground, right? To create a place in the middle, which was then used for demonstrations of the Nazis. And this fact was then for the city of Weimar today important to say, well, we don't want only to show that in Weimar was the Bauhaus created or founded, but we also want to show that this drama of the banishment of the Bauhaus started here as well. And because for the normal tourist until today, this fact is not clear and not really transported into the mind of the citizens, they said it's very important that we do that from now on. That from now on we want to show that Weimar is not only the city of classicism and of the modern movement, but it is also the city where the banishment of the modern movement started. And that's why the competition called this area here for us, where we could think about to create a modern museum. Here you see the model of this Gauforum, which has been built then. At the end, you see a big hall. Today this is a shopping mall. I will show it to you later. But otherwise, all the other buildings are exactly like this, only the tower is a fragment. And what you can see also, this Neue Museum is standing here in the second row. So this park, which was here, used to be here, is not there anymore. And here you see my first map from the first phase of the competition. And you can see that I decided to place the museum in a similar size as the Neues Museum, a similar footprint, also in the second row from this main street. So here, above here is the station. You come down here. This is the main street going to the city center. And you will pass this new museum and you will see it in the second row. And because it is standing in the second row, I said it has to be quite monumental and quite standing and visible from everywhere, and it has in a way the role to heal this extremely heterogeneous atmosphere which was here, because you have these buildings from the Nazis, then you have here the Weimar Halle, you have a rest of this kind of habitation of the northern development of Weimar, and you have this Volkspark, which is a beautiful Volkspark, but which was until today very hidden and no tourist would ever come there. So this is the urban context we had to find a position and find a solution how to place there the Bauhaus. This is the place how it looked like before we could start to realize the project. Yeah, here you can see again the Neues Museum, this Bauhaus Museum, and here the park. And this was indeed the most important aspect, because I thought this is the real positive point of the site, and I want to react to the park, and I want to show that I'm not part of this place. Even so, I try to find a dialogue between all these kind of different buildings. So today when you arrive, you see on the left das Neue Museum, then on the right one of these administration buildings of the Gauforum, and then you see this huge place in the middle. You see that this the scale is totally it's totally out of scale. You see that there's a parking lot underneath. You see a gap in between these open areas where you cannot enter the inner part. So this was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, the politics of Weimar, because they were afraid that neo-Nazis could gather there together, and so that's why they decided that the people could not enter this inner site. And at the end, you see that they changed this former Halle der Volksgemeinschaft into a shopping mall. So in a way, it's a totally absurd situation. And after 15 years, they realized that that was not the right way to deal with this kind of buildings. On the other side, as I said, you have this beautiful park. You have the Weimar Halle, which was rebuilt in the beginning of this century, and the place of the Bauhaus Museum is nowadays now here. Here you see it a little bit in detail. So you can see that I tried to follow the rectangular lines of the park, standing in the back a little bit of this small garden house. But I stand exactly at the edge of the different height situations of the park level, which is about 6 to 7 meters lower than the city level here. So I use this topographical difference to place the building to say, well, here is actually where the artificial landscape started or starts, and this is still the natural topography. And the building has the function to connect both levels inside and outside of the building. And I try to think of what kind of circulation systems I could use. And I was thinking of a way which you usually do in the mountains or maybe in the winery slopes. So that means that you follow the mountain line, you follow along, but you don't cross it. So that means, maybe here you can see it also, that all stairs inside and outside the buildings are parallel to this height difference, to this topographical difference between this level and this level. And here you can see it in the model, how it is facing the park. So the park is the main address for the museum with a little terrace on the park level. Here you can enter it and you find a cafe, or you can go up and enter the museum from this side. Here you see the park as it was before. And the other quotation I have is actually the Ilm Park, because in the Ilm Park you have this little river, the Ilm, crossing this small valley. And Goethe's little garden house is standing here, and he later defined a place for this Römische Haus, which he created together with an architect. So there is a view connection between this Römische Haus and the garden house here. And that was something which interested me then finally for the interior design concept. Here you see this Römische Haus. What you cannot see here, here's the little small river Ilm. And from this window, this is from the working space of Goethe in the garden house. You can see this römische house placed here, so you have this view connection. And in the design phase, I already tried to show the jury that I see there, or for me, there's an important link between this park and the other park. And inside, you can see that the interior concept is going up by these cascade-like stairs, and you have always a double-height volume with interior windows. And through these interior windows, you will have interior views which are very different from each level to another level. You can see it here also in a schematic diagrammatic plan. So you have double height voids with these cascade stairs, next double height void, and so on. And so you can enter from level -1 to level 3 up to the exhibition. And at the same time, you have one stair which is connecting all levels, which is so-called Himmelsleiter, which is connecting the levels from the street level to the highest exhibition level. And here you can see it in section with the big entrance portal, which connects the interior with the outside, and it's the only opening towards the Gau Forum. And that was my concept. I wanted to close up, not to open it, the museum to this area, but I want to open the museum to the park. Here you see this big staircase, as I explained, and each level has a door to the exhibition area, and now on the back there would be a window towards the city. And the other interesting point is that from the upper window, which is here behind, you would see the Tower of Buchenwald, because one has to know that Gau Forum could be built only by the prisoners of Buchenwald, so they came there every day to build this place. And this is also something which is for the tourist usually not very clear and not very visible. So here you see the section from the competition. You can see the different height levels from the city level to the park level. You see in the background a building which is a student home, apartment home building which was built during the GDR times. And you see the Weimar Halle and the lake, the little lake here in front. This is the south facade. At that time I had only one window here. Later on we could introduce another window here, which is for the art, how do you say this in English? To teach art with the children. And here, as I explained, you have this east facade, the entrance facade with only one big portal. And when you see this facade, the first reaction, I think, for everybody is that you feel a bit strange. You don't know why it is like that. And when you enter it, then you find yourself in a space which is very open, very bright, because the height of the room behind is exactly this height of this portal. So it is a very open and bright space. Here you see, when you look at when you stand at the gallery, looking through back to the city, looking through the portal back towards the city, and this is the view then towards the Gau Forum, and behind this student accommodation building, and that's how it is nowadays. And you can stand there at this balcony and you look through this art installation by Thomas Saraceno, which is very beautiful because it gives a certain filter inside, and you have a very bright and open space there. And then from there you can enter the exhibition, and there you have this cascade-like stairs. This is photographed before the exhibition was installed. But what you can see here very good is, I think, that the whole ceiling system is in the whole building the same. So the structure we use, the concrete beam structure, is very important for all technical things, like for the air condition as well as for heating and cooling. And the beams itself, so the prefabricated beams itself, they are, in German we say Bauteilaktivierung. I always forget how to explain that. That means that through the concrete water is floating, and by this you can cool the climate in the spaces. And this is a very efficient and energy low way to cool down the museum, because usually you have the problem in museums that you have too much, too high temperature, and because they have a lot of things they want to protect. I mean, the temperature conditions were are very restricted, so we had to find something which is very effective, and I think it's a very good system for a very good solution for that. And at the same time, the acoustic panels are also in between of these slabs, but they actually look like concrete, so nobody actually feels disturbed by this installation. This was a section. Yeah, here you see it again, this double height voids, which always introduce one theme in the exhibition. And from there you can then wander around, go to the next cascade stair, and achieving the next double height void. This is the same double height void space, introducing the number 1919, of course, because of the anniversary. It's a beautiful installation by a young design office in Berlin. And the whole art exhibition is done by Holzer Kobler, not by me. It's a Swiss office. And I think they did some parts, they did very, very nice. For example, I like very much this area here, which is so-called the new man, where they introduced the idea of a new man and what was, so connected to the Bauhaus, the ideas of play and many very nice ideas. And in this space here, they show the first phase where the Bauhaus was still very expressionistic. And I think that's also something which usually one does not connect with the Bauhaus, but it's actually important because it's the most experimental phase. And Gropius and the other teachers and the students are very, very free and just try many different things out. And I think it's quite nice to see that. Yeah, that's a detail. And when you are on the upper floors, then you can see that how these interior windows work, and that you can get different view connections, and that you can, also as a curator, also you have a certain freedom to connect contents in a different way. Here, for example, you see in this area the theme is the stage. So it's not only the Schlemmers theater, but also all the other puppets. For example, the wife of Leonel Feininger, she made beautiful puppets, or Paul Klee, etc. And these are all exhibited here. And again, you have a view down to the first exhibition area, and so you have always this kind of view connections. For example, this is again the area of the new man. And here you can see how the people enjoy this interior window, because we are lack of exterior windows. And I think you are very, very lucky here in this museum, because you have a different space layout, and so some impressions. And on the upper floor, then they have a beautiful collection of Mies van der Rohe furnitures, which they received partly from Haus Esters in Krefeld, original furnitures, and also from Haus Tugendhat. Yeah. And this finally is an extremely long staircase connecting all exhibition areas. And then this was the day of the opening. You can see how the people running in. We had a lot of people. I think in the first weeks we had the half of visitors like the Goethe Museum has the whole year. So it's still very popular. And here you just see the the information desk, which we designed. We used the material. We tried to, as a layout, we tried to be as rough as possible. We didn't want to be so museum-like, so we use metal galvalume. I don't know in English. It's a metal you use basically for climate installations and things like that. So it's a very rough material, but I think in the sense of a very minimalistic design, it looks quite good. And then we, in the lower level, on the park level, we have a so-called lounge with some furnitures. My daughter and myself, we designed them together. And then you have this beautiful view into the park. Unfortunately, at that time, there was still the outside, the exterior not finished yet, but I will receive soon better photographs, and you can see it. It's really beautiful. And you can sit outside and inside as you like. Very simple steel furnitures. And this chair, maybe that's interesting for you to know, this chair was developed during the GDR times in Weimar, because there were still some former Bauhaus students which were teachers at that time in Weimar at the university, and this chair was in the GDR times actually the most popular chair, and it is still produced. And I thought it's very good to show that there is a kind of continuity of modern movement until today. Then I decided to have an extremely simple handle. I didn't want to be in competition with Gropius and all the other masters. But the only thing what was important for me is the kind of what kind of surface the aluminium could have. And I went to the factory where they produced this handle. It's a so-called Wittgenstein handle. And there is a certain state before they polish it. And this status is very nice, and it looks a little bit already like used. And I thought it's a very good combination to our steel doors, which you can see here, which are also very simple. And altogether, I think it becomes a very good entity. Here you see the sign for all the donators of the museum. And again, you see this window looking down to the next floor below. Then outside the facade, we decided to have a prefabricated slabs, concrete slabs, and only by sandblasting it has a different color here. So it has 50% white cement in it. Therefore, it becomes very gentle. Sorry, the pictures are not very good. Maybe some of you were interested. You can have a look later it's a bit pity. So, and then here you see in the horizontal lines, we introduced LED element, which is covered with a white glass element to protect the LEDs. And this white glass is a recycled glass. And therefore, it has a certain structure. It looks a little bit like polar ice, one could say here. It's not clear, so you don't see the LEDs during the daytime. And at night time it will appear then, or during the sun setting, slowly the light is appearing. And this very heavy monolithic building becomes during the night very light and you could say it loses its massiveness. And this is also again the opening at that evening, and the people are standing in a row and waiting, and at the same time the light is changing, so we can use each line singular, and each line can be the intensity of the light can be dimmed, so it is sometimes very strong and very light, and it was a light, you could say a light installation, and at the same time we had a music group there outside, and they were following the rhythm of the light, and it was a very, very beautiful event. I think that's the last image I would show here, and thank you very much for your patience, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions and things which are not clear yet, so please feel open to ask me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heike. And so we do have time for a couple of questions. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Nope. Here we go.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the timeline on this. What was the date of the competition that when you started? How long did it take you to put the plans together? When was the decision made?
Yeah.
And when was it started, and when was it? It was obviously finished in April.
Well, you know, in Germany everything takes a little bit long. The competition was 2012, and we started 2013 because during that time they had to change the urban site regulations, you could say. It's a Bebauungsplan, I don't know. It's in Germany you have strict regulations in the cities about the height of the building and so on. So this they had to change it for the competition, and this took 1 year. Then we started 2013, and usually a building like that takes about 5 to 6 years. So it's you need a lot of patience. Yeah, thank you. So.
Beautiful building. Were you actually there during the construction overseeing
Yes,
things?
I was there every week. So I was there. Of course, I had my employees to stay there each day, to live there basically for that time. But I went there every week at least once, and sometimes twice. And it is necessary. I mean, you have to go there and to control and to see what's happening. And each week almost, you come again back to the office in Berlin, and I say, next catastrophe. We have to solve the next problem. So it's normal, I think.
What are your next projects?
I don't know. Really, I don't know. I wonder myself, but for the moment we are so busy still to hold lectures about the museum, and the Bauhaus anniversary takes a lot of energy. And I said for myself, I want to do that. I want to communicate with the society. Yeah, I think it's very important because, for example, in Weimar, I was living in Weimar between 1999 and 2007. And at that time, the citizens of Weimar themselves, they did not understand what Bauhaus actually means. I mean, they knew that it was founded there, but they did not understand at all that it is important. Yeah? Bach was important. Bach was living there, and Goethe, of course, and so on. But the Bauhaus was no theme. And I think through this anniversary, the understanding of this movement is suddenly very much changing, and I think it's important to communicate that. Yeah.
Do you have one?
By the way, it's a really spectacular building. There's one question, and what you did with the light, was that part of the original desire for the city? There was something that would stand up at night, or was your idea to make it so? Because I think it's pretty amazing.
I think it was from the beginning in the design, in the competition already. I had the idea to enlighten it at night, because I wanted to have this aspect that the massiveness can kind of dissolve. So you deal with this monolithic and very minimalistic facade and architecture, but at the same time I wanted to dissolve it. And this comes a little bit actually from my I did a lot of space installations in the past 20 years, and I also used light very often as an instrument. So it comes from this kind of experience, I think. Yeah.
Maybe we could do 2 more.
Yeah, it's we had a very limited budget, so we have about 4,000 square meter usable area, and half of it is exhibition area. Then there is about third administration, and the rest is other public area. And the costs for the architects were 14.5 million euros brutto. This is really not much, and this was the sum during the competition, and we ended up like with 17 million. So because the prices, I have to say, the prices are extremely increasing recently, because the economy in Germany is very also increasing, and parallel to that, the building costs are getting up. And we had, for example, once the problem that we have 2 different kind of concretes. You have this prefabricated concrete and how do you say Ortbeton? Huh? On-site, yeah, on-site concrete. And we called, we tried to find some only one partner to build everything together. And then, how do you say Ausschreibung, Jan? Bitte. Bidding phase, yeah. You announce and then we got only one offer back, and this had a double price. But yeah, and then we had to think, okay, what we can do, and then we split it. So we split the prefabricated concrete and the on-site concrete into 2 kind of. Now I guess. Huh? Sorry, my English is not too good. Sorry. Yeah,
great.
but it's just an example that you can see how difficult it was to keep the costs. Yeah.
Let's do 1 more.
Could you say a word about the nature of the exhibits inside the museum and connection to the Bauhaus?
Yeah. This is always the most difficult part for me, because the office which made the exhibition, we did not have a lot of meetings together. And so far as I understood it, they try really at first to show what is the Weimarian point of view of the Bauhaus, no? How it developed there, and as I said, is a very experimental phase. The stage is a very important part, because also Oskar Schlemmer was developing it in Weimar already. And then what is interesting is, I think, that they have the first Bauhaus collection, which is defined by Walter Gropius himself. Because when Walter Gropius was leaving to Dessau, he was starting to define a collection and putting it into wooden boxes. But he forgot to bring them to Dessau. Somehow they never left Weimar, and they were forgotten. And Then I think it must have been in the middle of the 50s, they were founded by somebody. And so this is the first original collection by Walter Gropius. And when you see this collection, it's very interesting because it has many things in it which you don't expect. For example, a lot of pottery, extremely a lot of pottery, which you never, and this was because, of course, there was this workshop for pottery which came from the school from Van der Velde. No? And so I think it's quite special what they did there. But I think you have to come and see it. It's easier rather than my explanation. Yeah.
Thank you, Heike.
No, you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.